everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you're just joining us, just so you know, I've gone ahead and muted everyone. You do have the option, if you're ready to ask questions at any point in time, to unmute yourself or wait for the end. But we're going to just give everybody just another minute, as we have, I know it's dinner time for some folks. We might have some stragglers coming in late on the call, but give us just a second and we'll go ahead with our scheduled webinar. All right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar topic tonight. The first thing that I want to do before I introduce our topic and our gracious host for tonight is go ahead and just do some housekeeping. So for those of you that have not been on one of our Zoom webinars in the past, we will save time at the end of our webinar for questions. Jeff will take and field questions from the audience. So if you have something that comes up towards the end, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself and we'll ask questions of Jeff directly at that time. But also, if we go under the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have stuff that comes up along the way, questions, comments for Jeff, I can go ahead and read those and get those into the conversation as soon as possible. So we'll be using the chat feature for that, as well as our question and answer session at the end. So if we have any questions, everything can go there. My name is Ashley Fillets. So let me introduce myself and then I'll introduce Jeff. And I am the manager of training and education at BlazeSports America. So part of one of the things that I do in my role as manager of training and education is oversee one of our initiative at BlazeSports, which is our Youth Lead initiative. So our Youth Lead initiative is an initiative that basically gets our youth that are in our programs involved with opportunities to help prepare them on the court and off the court for what comes next in life. So for most of our athletes, that is college down the line, whether it's a traditional associate's degree, bachelor's degree, whether they're going to play for sports or if their sports career is done and they're just moving on and going straight to college. But we have a lot of athletes that don't actually pursue a post-secondary experience and go straight into the workforce. So it's part of our job at BlazeSports in conjunction with a grant through GVRA to help make sure that our athletes at BlazeSports are most prepared as possible when they leave our program. So ideally, we're talking about teamwork, we're talking about leadership, we're talking about self-advocacy, we're kind of dipping our toes into transition and preparing our athletes to kind of start thinking about what comes next. But one of the things that's always in our conversations is the great work that GVRA does as far as what we can do on the court, they can do off the court and actually take it so much farther so that your students, by the time they leave our program, by the time they leave high school, they are ready to tackle what's next and they have the skills to transition as seamlessly as possible. I think everybody has some hiccups along the way, but by using resources such as GVRA, we are able to kind of foresee some things that may be difficult in their life coming up and give them the skills to appropriately navigate those transitions. So who I have with me today, which is my pleasure to introduce, is Jeff Allen. So Jeff received his master's degree of science in counseling and psychology with a concentration in vocational rehabilitation from Troy University in 2010. He began his career in rehabilitation at Roosevelt Warm Springs, which if you've been at our Blaze camp, you are very familiar with from a couple of years ago. Institute for Rehabilitation as a counseling intern and worked part-time as a social service technician in the actual dormitory. So over the past 9 years, Jeff has served in several different roles within GVRA, with the vast majority of these roles being in transition services. So these positions include a transition counselor who is covering Hall County Schools, statewide coordinator for transition services, career pathways specialist under the E3 grant, policy and appeals advisor. And Jeff now serves as the assistant director of transition services. So Jeff is here to talk to us about everything that we need to know about transition services, what they are, how GVRA can help, how you make that next step. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. I'll be monitoring the chat and turn everything over to Jeff.
Thanks, Ashley. So good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for inviting me to join you all. Transition is definitely my passion. It's been kind of my life's work to say the least. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about GVRA, who we are. I know some of you have a little bit of familiarity with us, but there may be some other individuals that are joining us that aren't as familiar with what we do. And then I want to talk specifically around the transition related services that we offer as our young adults are making that transition out of high school into whatever the next phase of their life is post secondary education. So I'll start off with who we are. So Vocational Rehabilitation is, we're a state agency. We fall under the overarching umbrella of the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. There are actually 5 programs that fall underneath the agency in total. Vocational Rehabilitation probably being the most known and the largest program. That's all of our client services, client-facing services. But we also have the disability adjudication services. So if you have an individual that's looking to or is receiving SSI or SSDI, they've probably done work with our disability adjudication services. We also have the business enterprise program, which is a training program for blind individuals to learn how to run different stores and businesses. If you ever stop at a rest area in the state of Georgia and you get anything out of that vending machine is run and owned by a blind individual that came through our business enterprise program. We also have Georgia Industries for the Blind, which is down in Bainbridge, Georgia. And they're a manufacturing facility where the vast majority of their employees are blind individuals that are working, filling different contracts and things that we have with different organizations there. Then we have the Roosevelt Warm Springs and the Cave Spring Center, our 2 residential facilities. So those are kind of the makeup of GVRA. Inside of vocational rehabilitation itself, we kind of have 2 different groups that come through there. We have what we call transition individuals. So those would be those students that are between the ages of 14 and 22 that are transitioning out of high school, transitioning into adulthood. And then we also have what we call a general VR, which is going to be any individual that doesn't really meet that definition of a youth or a student with a disability. So they're over the age of 22 or really over the age of 24. And they may have, either they have a disability from birth, they may have acquired a disability throughout their life, things along those lines. And so that kind of also speaks a little bit to who we serve. We are an eligibility program, not an entitlement program, but our primary eligibility requirements are you have a permanent physical or mental disability that poses some form of barrier to employment. That's kind of the most basic eligibility criteria to be part of our program. So if I were to go out today and I broke my leg and it's something that's going to either heal naturally or it could heal with a surgical intervention, I wouldn't really qualify for VR services because it's not deemed a permanent disability. Now, if I had permanent implications from that injury, then that's a different story. But just so we don't just serve any individual that's got an injury. They have to have that permanent disability. Our goals naturally are to help Georgians with disabilities live independent and lives that they want to lead. So our whole goal is to help them find independence and employment. Our primary focus is always going to be around employment for individuals with disabilities. And we have a number of referral sources. In my world, in the transition, naturally, one of our biggest referral sources are going to be local high schools and charter schools. We even get some private and homeschooling that are referral sources for us. We have different community rehabilitation providers across the state that we both partner with that'll also send referrals if somebody were to go through their doors. A prime example of that would be something like a Goodwill or an Easter Seals. So if they maybe access a Goodwill or Easter Seals and they're needing assistance with finding employment and they have a disability, a lot of times they'll refer them over to us as well. And so we have a really decent referral source network kind of across the state of Georgia. We have offices all across the state. Basically, I think there's 38 field offices or something along those lines. We've got about 600 employees, and about 300 and so of those are dedicated counselors. And so we believe in the certified rehabilitation counselor being the most qualified individual to serve a person with a disability, because we go through specialized training around how disabilities impact employability, et cetera. And so that's kind of the makeup of our agency and the people that would be serving the individuals that we serve. So here's a great little infographic that one of my team members came up with. And I really love it because it kind of helps you see from a transition perspective what it looks like to access VR services. So in the VR world, we have two things going on now. With the reauthorization of the Rehabilitation Act, when they did the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act, there was a very heavy focus put around transition services. And the really heavy focus was what they call pre-employment transition services. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about those here in a minute. But it's really, those are that, I call them the appetizer. So the Rehabilitation Service Administration, in which we fall underneath, they like to call it that light touch, but really it's that first initial sprinkling of what does the world of work look like for an individual with a disability as they're transitioning out. And so the process really starts there with the pre-employment transition services. There's language in the law, without getting you bored with a bunch of legislation and things like that, but there's language in the law around what we call a potentially eligible individual. And that's that student with a disability. So they're 14 to 22, and they are eligible for and receiving services under either an IEP or a 504, or if they happen to be in like a homeschool or a private school, they have disability documentation, and they would be eligible for their services if they were in a school that has IEPs and 504s. And so that's kind of the initial entryway into VR services. Once we have determined that that individual needs more in-depth, kind of intensive services, then we actually begin what we call the VR intake process, and actually moving forward with taking an application and determining their eligibility for our services. And part of that eligibility assessment is looking at the disability documentation, kind of determining how the disability impacts that individual, what barriers do they have, what strengths do they have, et cetera. And then we start moving through the VR process, which is kind of outlined here. So you have your eligibility assessment, then we actually do an eligibility determination. And then we do what we call a vocational needs assessment. And that's where we really dive a little bit deeper into the individual around what it is that they're interested in doing, what are going to be the barriers to them attempting to be able to do that, what are related factors that may come into play, like transportation or location. If I think about some of our individuals in South Georgia, there's not as many opportunities as we have here in Metro Atlanta, things along those lines. And how are we going to be able to meet them up with what they're trying to accomplish? Once all that's been determined and we've kind of narrowed it down to a vocational goal, then we actually develop out their individualized plan for employment. And that, for lack of a better terms, is almost like a contract between ourselves and the individual that outlines the services that we've identified are going to be needed to help them become successful, and kind of loose time frames of when we think that's going to happen. It is a living document, and it can be changed literally at any time. It can be changed 10 minutes after the initial draft is done if need be. But that's really what kind of guides and aids us in our path to employment. And then we have actual service delivery, employment, and then we provide follow-up services once the individual becomes employed. And then ultimately, if they are able to maintain that job for 90 consecutive days, we are able to move them towards a case closure of what we call successfully closed. And then they always have the ability to re-access us either through post-employment services, or if the inevitable happens and they end up losing that position, they can, re-access our services again if need be. So let's talk a little bit about those pre-employment transition services. So what are they? There are 5 required areas that are outlined in the Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Act in which students with disabilities need to be exposed to. So services need to be provided in these 5 areas. Those are instruction and self-advocacy, which kind of relates back to some of what Ashley was saying that they're already doing as well. And you'll start seeing some of the overlapping and why we have such a good collaboration as I talk about some of the things that we do. Naturally, we want to do some job exploration counseling. How else are we going to learn about the world of work if we don't get out there and do some exploration on what type of work is out there and what is available? We try to assist with getting set up for work-based learning opportunities. There's a lot of studies and a lot of statistics out there that's showing that early access to different work-based learning opportunities allows an individual to be more successful down the line. It also helps them really with that career exploration. I always like to use an example of a young lady I worked with when I was still a counselor up in Gainesville. When we were going through her case, she really wanted to be a nurse. And so I was able to get her a job shadowing opportunity with a nurse. And so, we're going through the process. She's being able to follow this nurse along, and they came across a patient that had some bleeding. Okay. And literally she almost passed out, and it was a complete immediate turnoff for her. And so that led to a deeper conversation because she told me, she's like, okay, I don't think I ever want to be a nurse because I can't deal with blood and things like that. And I'm like, that's all right. I was like, well, what drew you to wanting to be a nurse? And she said, well, outside of just being able to talk with people and care for people, I really just like to wear scrubs. I think it's great that I could wear scrubs instead of like a dress or a business suit to work. And so that gave us other ideas and other options that we could look at and play with. And, if one of the main things she was really interested in was being able to wear scrubs, well, there's a lot of other jobs that don't require blood for her to be able to wear scrubs. And so a lot of that all comes with this work-based learning and job exploration. The 4th area there is going to be what we call counseling on post-secondary training options. And so we talked a little bit about that when Ashley was doing her intro. There's a lot of options once you leave the secondary education world. I mean, you've got associate's degrees, you've got bachelor's degrees, you've got certificate programs that sometimes only take 6 or 8 months, but still get you an industry recognized credential that leads to a very good job. And we have another thing that's been going on over probably the past 10 or 12 years. That's the inclusive post-secondary movement, where individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the opportunity to participate in activities on a college campus, a lot of which are more geared around work, but it gives them the social experience and things like that. In most of the settings, they're not actual degree seeking or credit attaining individuals. So they're really just auditing the classes, but it has a lot of the social aspects and the workplace aspects with that as well. But we also have a really unique program down at Albany Tech, and I'm already having some conversations with the technical college system of Georgia's deputy commissioner around what I'm calling supported education, going through some of those credentialing where you actually are getting a certificate through the technical college, but we're looking at modifying the time or the curriculum to allow individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities the time they may need. So it's still leading to what we call a recognized credential that would allow them to go into a specific field. And so that's kind of, it's a newer option in the world of inclusion, but it could be the wave of the future to really get some great credentials in the hands of individuals that may have historically been told, oh, all you're ever going to be is a bagger or something along those lines. And we're really trying to get out of that mindset. One of the great things about our new leadership here at GVRA is really that thought that every individual deserves the opportunity to attempt employment, and that it doesn't have to be the 3 F's: filth, fur, or food. That there's plenty of options out there. And as I talk about some of the services we have, and I won't go into every one, or we'll be here for well over the hour that we have allotted. But as I start to talk about some of the services, you'll see how we've got things geared to help that individual kind of find the area that best fits them. And then the last pre-ETS area that I wanted to talk about, which is our workplace readiness training. And that's really along the lines of dressing for success, interviewing skills, behaviors, working with coworkers, dealing with a supervisor that you may not necessarily get along with, and appropriate work behaviors all fall under that workplace readiness training. And so it starts kind of on the appetizer end, for a lack of a better word, under pre-employment transition services, but it's one that carries over once they become a full-blown client as well. So from the pre-employment transition services, then like I said, we're going to actually move over into the more traditional VR services. And so I've kind of broke this down by the different paths that individuals may or may not take with us. And I just did a little bit of talking about this one, but I wanted to kind of hit on it one more time. So one of the transitions that an individual may make is into the inclusive post-secondary education arena. I spoke a little bit about what it is. Georgia has 9 programs across the state this year. And if you want more information on the specific programs, you can actually go to thinkcollege.net. And they'll actually break down and talk about the different programs. Each one of them kind of has a niche area that they try to get individuals connected with. So I'll use Georgia State as an example. They have a really good like broadcasting and journalism, things along those lines. So that's kind of one of the focus areas they have at their program. But if you go and explore on that website, you can see all the different ones here in the state of Georgia. One of the things we have done recently, because outside of Albany Tech, these individuals aren't actually receiving credit for their courses, we've had to structure our support of an inclusion post-secondary, and that we are now providing support for actual service provision that very closely mirrors services that an individual could get if they weren't in an inclusion program. Like all the inclusion programs do some form of pre-employment transition services. Most of them cover all 5 areas, but they're also doing, in some cases, individualized job placement and job development because they're working with their contacts that they have after a student is getting ready to graduate. So we're starting to work with them from that perspective. So an individual that goes through inclusion post-secondary, while we aren't able to support them with tuition and fees and books like we may be able to when I talk about the next topic, we are able to provide support for employment-related services. And so that's always an option for somebody that may be interested in doing that. Then another popular transition that we have a lot of individuals that go through is actually a transition to college. And so the main thing to keep in mind for GVRA to be able to support you is it's got to be for a specific vocational goal that we are working towards. We're going to set specific objectives that we're going to try to help you reach while you're going through that program. We're going to make sure we're addressing any support needs that you may have, getting you in contact with disability services there at the college, because it is a really drastic difference from the secondary education and IDEA to when you move out into ADA. You go from the least restrictive environment to almost in a way, and I don't mean that this is going to sound kind of harsh, but the ADA is kind of the bare minimum to make sure that you have accessibility to what's out there. And so we kind of help fill in some of those gaps and getting you connected with proper accommodations and resources. We also are always looking at what we call measurable skill gains. That can be something as simple as passing a course or gaining a certification along the way to your actual diploma. And then those credential attainments like your, an associate's degree, a recognized certification, a diploma from a technical college, or even, a bachelor's degree, master's degree, a doctorate, if that's what we've determined is going to be the most appropriate goal. All along the way, we look at that. And VR does have the ability, depending on the individual situation, to provide funding towards some of these programs as well. And so that's another thing it's very individualized. So we would look at the individual. There's some other factors that come into play, like we do have what we call a financial need that comes into play there, and things along those lines. But it would be something you and your counselor would be discussing all along the way so that you have as much information as you need as you're making these decisions. Then we also have where we have individuals that are transitioning to one of our residential vocational training programs. As Ashley mentioned, some of you may be familiar with Roosevelt Warm Springs. We do have a residential program there. There's about 150 beds there, and they're it's not brand new, but to me it's still brand new because I was in the old dormitory when I was there. But they have this gorgeous dormitory there. They have access to all the stuff there on the campus, the CTR, the Center for Therapeutic, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. But the Center for Therapeutic Recreation that's down there, that's got the pool and the basketball courts and everything. And the students are actually immersed there on the campus. And so during the day, they're either in classes learning work skills, or some of them are working on academics and things like that. And then a lot of times in the afternoons, they're actually going out and getting work on work sites while they're there. Cave Spring Center up in Cave Spring, Georgia, has historically been more geared towards our sensory populations. It's a much smaller campus. There's only about 50 individuals there. They're about a mile and a half from the Georgia School for the Deaf up there. So there's a big connection in the deaf community in that area. And so they have historically done more services towards individuals with sensory disabilities, but a lot of the same stuff. They're looking at independent living, they're looking at employability skills, and then they actually are getting them real life experience out in a community working. And then kind of our last transition, which to me is the most important and could happen after any of the others, is that transition to work. And so no matter what your path is, at some point, our last focus is going to be getting you employed. But if you took the straight transition to work path, you may encounter some of these very popular services that we offer. The first one being community work adjustment. And so it's actually getting the individual out in the community working, but with supports to help them, maybe if they have issues with, one of the more popular ones for my transition group is really just punctuality, returning from breaks on time, and not being on that cell phone. But you're able to actually do it in real time in a work setting with basically like a job coach helping you learn the proper behaviors. We also offer on-the-job training where we work with employers and help out actually getting the individual trained on the job. So they're hired. We're helping out with the training and the supports they need. And then based on how things go during that time frame, if we need to do more extended supports, we can, or if they've already built in supports there on the job with another coworker or something along those lines, then we make sure those continue. Also, we assist with job searches and job placements. We have a whole team within our agency that's called Employment Services, and their focus is to build relationships in the communities and assist individuals in getting connected with employers and helping them not only meet the employer's needs, but meet the client's needs as to what they're trying to accomplish. Job coaching is another very popular one. That again, you have an individual that's been employed, but they need help learning the tasks and things along those lines, but it doesn't need to be over an extended period of time. So they can have a job coach come in, work with them for the first couple of weeks to learn the tasks of the job, and then they'll slowly start backing off their time. And then we get into supported employment. We actually have 3 styles of supported employment, but one is very specific to individuals with behavioral health disabilities. So I didn't focus on it a lot here, but we have our traditional supported employment. And supported employment are for those individuals that really do need long-term supports in order to be successful on their job. And once they get connected with a supported employment provider, that provider will actually be following them for the life of that job, checking in, making sure they have the supports that they need to be successful, and making sure that there's not any issues that come up. And then customized supported employment are where we go out and we actually look for things that individuals may not be a set job for. So old language would have called that like a job carve. So you take a portion of a job that needs to be done, and you've got an individual that can complete that task, and you help them find that job. And this is historically for our more significantly impaired individuals, those ones that again in the past may have been told you'll never work. But we have this great process that we call the discovery process, where we look at not only pen and paper testing, but what do they do in their everyday life that could equate to job skills and job tasks, and what are their skills and interests that could relate over to a job. And then we go out and we actually try to work with employers to develop out a position that they could fill. And so that's a really I was kind of on the ground floor when we started that here in Georgia, and I've watched it grow. And to me, it's a very exciting process because, again, it's getting those individuals that may have in the past been told, you're not going to be able to go out and do anything, are now having that opportunity to go out and do things. All right, so that was kind of VR in a nutshell. And I know I just threw a lot of information at you in about 30 minutes, but I definitely wanted to make sure we had time for questions. So Ashley, if we want to open it up either via the chat or whatever you think works best.
We had one from the chat that came up, and I think it's a really good segue. So basically the question from the chat was, pretty sure their child qualifies, what's the next step? So what would you tell them as far as like how to get in touch? What should they be doing?
Great. So if your child is still enrolled in a school system, we work pretty closely with almost every school district in the state. We have a point of contact that can help to get the referral process started. The other thing is, if by chance they're not in a school system, or that school system says they don't have a good contact with GVRA, we do have those local field offices, and anybody can go into a local field office, or in today's day and age with the virtual, call into that office and get connected with an individual to start the process. And on my last slide here, when I go up, will be our website. And on our website, it lists every office with contact information for every office. So you can look up your county and see what office covers that county and then get connected. And I also have my contact information. So I will also offer myself up to help make connections as well. So if you are, if you're experiencing any struggles or anything along those lines, the downside to COVID is we have staff that aren't in the office all the time. They're all working virtually. So if you show up at an office and they're not there, and the telephone number, I'll be glad to help make those connections as well. But historically, for the school systems, we have a point of contact. Usually it would be one of the case managers or the lead case manager at the school. Sometimes if you have a CTI program, it's the CTI coordinators at your school. Each system sets their things up just a little bit differently, but that could be your first point of contact. And then if they are unsure, or it might be one of those rare schools where due to turnover, we may not have a counselor in place right now, you can reach out to me and I'll help you get connected.
Great. And a follow-up to that, Jeff. So we have some of our athletes on this call are younger than 14, some are already 14. When should they start the process of reaching out if they know they want to utilize Voc Rehab services as soon as possible? When should they start reaching out?
So for those individuals that are younger than 14, one of the things I have started working on, I just assumed this role in August, but one of the things I've started working on, and it's not always easy because we don't have always the staff, but trying to get our team members either to attend that transitional IEP from 8th grade into 9th grade, or provide contact information and referral information during that IEP. If they're already 14 and above, definitely find out who that contact person is at your school district to reach out to us, and we'll get you connected. We'll start anybody that's basically in the 9th or 10th grade. We're going to get them started up doing those pre-employment transition services, getting them that appetizer, so to speak. By the time they hit that junior and senior year is when we're really going to start moving over to the application phase and getting them onto the full-blown VR caseload, because that's when we're hitting that pivotal transition time, and we need to start developing out those services they're going to need post-school.
Perfect. And then another one, can you tell us more about people that are individuals primarily with physical disabilities? So that's the majority of our athletes on the call, but I know we have some others as well, transitioning to college. So what specifically kind of support is available from Voc Rehab, and what applies, this is a good question, and what applies for out-of-state colleges?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first portion of that. Naturally, we'll look at the individual and what their needs are, but some of the things that we have assisted with in the past is helping get appropriate accommodations at the school. We've even helped in some instances where if they were in a manual chair, but getting across campus became kind of a challenge, we've got them connected with our assistive work technology team to see if there's either something like an iDrive or something along those lines that may make it easier for them to get to and from. In today's virtual world, we do a lot of work around technology and things along those lines. So that's some of the things that we do for the physical disabilities. And then naturally, if there needs to be like a work site accommodation or things along those lines, I'll use a very basic example, but I can think of an individual where they got hired on as a cashier, and naturally their chair was lower, and so it was causing issues reaching the cash register and helping the individual. So we had our rehabilitation engineer come in and just build a platform that they could roll up onto that got them at the proper height. They could allow them to remain ergonomic and still be able to serve everybody. So it's just different things like that, and it would be a very individualized process based off of what they need. And then as far as out-of-state colleges go, so we do provide some support for out-of-state colleges. We have a fee schedule that we go off of. And so typically out-of-state schools, we don't pay as we aren't able to pay as much because we can't pay the out-of-state fees and things like that. Everything's got to match the fee schedule established by the state of Georgia. But we have individuals all across the country in different programs that we're providing some type of support to.
Awesome. Thank you. So one of our parents just mentioned as an aside that they recently had an IEP meeting for their child, and they actually had a VR counselor attend, and they found that super helpful as far as helping make that connection and being part of the IEP team. And this child's in 10th grade, so age 16, right at that pivotal time.
Yeah. We, it's not an excuse, but naturally, as with a lot of agencies, we have vast turnover. But the goal is to always, if we can attend in person, to be there. And if we aren't able to attend in person, the practice is that we provide some form of informative information that teacher or that case manager can provide to the parents to let them know what we are and what we can do. The downside is we don't always get invited to IEPs either. And so if we're not invited, naturally, we can't attend. So we're trying to also work with the schools to get them to recognize that we really need to be one of those core partners there as well.
So a follow-up question, and then Tommy has a question. How would they go about requesting someone to attend an IEP meeting?
So forgive me for not knowing all the proper terms, but whoever is the lead that's doing your IEP team, you can ask them and request that VR be a part of your IEP meeting. I know, so I'll use a personal example. My sister, when my nephew was still in school, had no idea. And if I hadn't been working for VR, she never would have known that was an option for her son. And I told her, you need to request them to come to your IEP meeting, and that can start it right there.
Awesome. Great. All right, Tommy, I think Tommy had 2 questions for you.
Yes. Hey, Jeff. Also, hello, everyone on the call. 2 questions for you. First, the whole world of Voc Rehab often gets misrepresented as, something that is utilized for individuals with intellectual disabilities. So I really appreciate you advocating that that's not the case. Those primary physical disability folk can still receive good services. So my question for you is, and my apologies if you outlined this in the presentation, so some of our athletes and just, individuals in general may not necessarily need that full, employment assistance during them, having the job, but may need some supports before the job. So, if we had an athlete or an individual comes to you that really primarily needs that assistance in the resume building area, the interview skills, really getting successful in those things, disability disclosure, advocating for the accommodations that they need in the workplace, also understanding that, hey, they need to give you, those reasonable accommodations. Is that something that GVRA can do?
Yeah, definitely. So we're still going to try to tie it to an ultimate outcome for them. Now, they may not need our assistance in the actual going out there and interviewing and things like that, but getting prepared for it is definitely a prime service. So when I was talking about the pre-ETs, I mentioned workplace readiness. Well, that's a service that carries over for all of our individuals. It just happens to be one of the 5 required areas. And everything that you just mentioned falls right under that. So it's all about that, developing that resume, maybe even getting some practice interviewing time in. Because, if you come in and apply for a job with the state, you're going to go through a behavioral style interview where you're getting interviewed by a panel of people. And if you've never done that, I can tell you it's beyond intimidating. But, but working through those different types of things with that individual to get them prepared. And then they may say, okay, I'm going to go do the rest on my own. But the case wouldn't be closed at that point. We're still going to work with them to try to make sure they're successful in obtaining that job.
Awesome. Did you hear that, everyone? It's some good stuff. So one final question for you. So I've actually had an athlete reach out and they have an open case with GVRA. And if someone, has a case, maybe they haven't really had a lot of time to, interact with their counselor, or things just kind of went on the back burner, how can they, restart that fire? How could they, restart those conversations? Is there a person that they can contact if they haven't, if that relationship with the GVRA counselor kind of dwindled? What can they do?
Yeah, so the simplest way is to kind of start by reaching back out to that local office through the mainline number, because let's be honest, and we've had, especially during the COVID times, we've had massive turnover. So that person that they initially had may not even be with us, but if they call that office, they can help get them set up. I'm also going to offer myself up for your athletes as well. If you're having some of those issues, feel free to email me or give them my contact information if you'd like. I'd be glad to talk with them and try to get them reconnected, because we completely restructured our whole agency starting back. It really started kind of around February or March of last year, but the big restructuring happened between October and January. And so we have all new leadership in place. We've got some new roles within the agency and things like that. So there's a possibility that a person may have shifted, and ideally they would have provided information to their clients, but I'm not completely blind to the fact that sometimes people just don't do what they're supposed to do. But we can definitely make sure we get them reconnected.
Sounds good. Thanks for taking the time.
Yep, definitely.
Sorry, I'm talking, but I'm muted, so that didn't work. Okay, so some follow-up questions. A parent on the line wants to know if VR can help with workplace accommodations for a part-time job for a teen or someone that's in college, as far as like mainly looking to get like a summer job. So not something that's like permanent, but as far as like a part-time job that's perhaps something more seasonally.
Potentially, yeah. So again, we're as we work towards that end goal of whatever the main employment outcome is, we're not oblivious to the fact that there's going to come what we call transitional employment. Honestly, that's a good thing, especially for a young adult, to get any kind of time on a job. And so we can work with that individual. We can even look at potentially, working with the employer around disability awareness and what may be an appropriate, reasonable accommodation for them, things along those lines. So getting them contacted with our VR staff is the first step, because we got to make sure we have proper releases and everything to speak to people. But yeah, it's definitely something we can work on.
And then this is another parent that looks like they turned the application in after an IEP meeting in December, and they're still waiting to hear. And so it's fine. They just didn't know what kind of turnaround time, especially with COVID, since stuff is delayed. They're
So
right now.
did they, just by chance, did they turn it in directly to our VR staff, or did it go to the school system personnel? Okay, because I will say one of the things that we ran into is some of our school system staff will wait till they have a couple of them before they send them. But if it went directly to our staff, ideally the time frame would be within 5 to 10 business days. They'll be reaching out to you to try to set up time to actually get the paperwork and everything finalized. So that might be one that you can have them connect with me, and I can do some follow up on.
And then this next one, do they have to qualify for SSI in order to work with Voc Rehab? The athlete is turning 18, or is it all one and the same?
No. So the only thing that they have to do to qualify to receive service through us is just have a permanent disability that poses a barrier to employment. If they happen to be an SSI or SSDI recipient, we have what we call a presumptive eligibility, because basically the SSI or SSDI already states that by the federal definition, they meet the definition of a person with a disability. So we determine them presumptively eligible, but it's not a requirement that they be on SSI or SSDI.
I think Tommy had another question that came up as well.
Yes, Jeff, I have one more. So it's not necessarily a question about the GVRA services, more so your maybe connections. So this whole world of transition, right? It's a lot to deal with, take in, and start doing. Is there any resources or places to go, maybe a newsletter subscription or anything like that that you would recommend our families or us as BlazeSports to give out to our athletes or future athletes or anything like that?
Yeah, so kind of on the parent side, I know a great resource here within the state of Georgia is Parent to Parent of Georgia. They have a lot of great information around the whole world of transition, a lot of personal experiences, and a network. As far as different newsletters, I will apologize on that. Most of mine are more specific to like the rehab professional. But there's the DOE website has a lot of great links and resources under their transition page. Parent to Parent has a lot of good ones. Our staff sometimes tend to know about things in the local areas that me at a state perspective, I don't always know about too. So I always like to say our local offices usually have resources that may be more specific to your area,
All right, so I think I'm gonna let questions keep rolling in for just a second, but I did want to mention a few more things as far as additional ways that Blaze tries to help build the bridge between ourselves and what we do as far as sport, which again, we view sport as a vehicle for success. So in sport, we're getting the teamwork piece, we're learning self-advocacy skills, we're learning leadership skills, all stuff that's going to help you in your transition to whatever's next after sport. But we also do a few things that I don't think we have highlighted on this webinar that I wanted to point out as far as bridging the gap between us and Voc Rehab. One of the things that we do that we did not do last year because of COVID, but you can mark your calendar because it will be happening this year, is in October. I take 10 to 15 I'm going to call you guys young adults, so 14 to 18-year-olds, on a leadership retreat in Winder, Georgia at Camp Willoway. And the purpose of our leadership retreat is really for our teens to start thinking away from their parents and kind of thinking a little more for what's next for them, specifically about self-advocacy, specifically about transition, and not transition from a real Voc Rehab stance, but more of just like, have we started thinking about it? Like, where do you think you want to go to school? Do you know that you might need a checking account? Do you know how to manage a credit card, that you shouldn't walk onto campus the first day and pick up that free credit card sign up and sign right away and you have a $3,000 limit? And we also talk about developing teamwork skills, and we do this all over a weekend at Camp Twin Lakes. So it's not just Tommy and myself PowerPointing you guys to death with everything that you need to know. We're up on the climbing wall, we're down at boating, we're doing archery. So it's kind of a way to, for your teens to get out of the house, be physically active, but also really have a weekend around thinking about what's next and what's important to them and what they kind of want in life with a supportive group of their peers. So that's coming up in October of this year at Camp Twin Lakes. We also, through our grant with GVRA, offer specifically internships with us at Blaze, where we'll bring you in seasonally, so either in the spring, in the summer, or in the winter, and we'll actually let you do basically some vocational training at Blaze. We had 2 interns 2 summers ago and had an intern last summer as well, even with COVID, that were our former athletes and transitioned to our interns. Other things that we're able to do that I think some of our teens know, but we have job shadowing opportunities that are very unique to Blaze. For instance, our partnership with the Hawks, we were able to take our summer interns from a few summers ago and actually have them do a job shadowing opportunity for a week with the Hawks. So we were able to kind of use that connection. And then the other thing that we do, which you should know because you got this email, is we provide quarterly webinars and trainings, some that are geared specifically for our youth, and then some that are specifically geared more like this talk for our parents, that are really helping to kind of bridge the gap of what vocational rehabilitation services are out there, what you might need as far as next steps for your child, really kind of thinking through how we make our athletes into successful humans and productive people in the workforce after they leave our program. So those are all available under our Youth Lead program. Let me double check if anybody had anything else? Yes, so specifically for our athletes, we did want to kind of recap that we also offer the online tutoring resource too. So if your child is struggling in any of their academic areas, and that looks like that's going to be a hindrance going forward, that we still do offer that as well. While we still have Jeff on the line, does anybody have any lingering questions for Jeff? He's put up his contact information, which is great. He's very graciously invited you guys to reach out if you have any issues or problems along the way, which is great. I think it's awesome to have such a strong contact that is as knowledgeable as he is with our partnership with GVRA. This webinar was recorded, so if you had to step out for a few minutes or you think you missed something or you want to go back and review anything, the full recording will be posted on our YouTube channel and linked onto our Youth Lead site. But since you also registered to attend this session, I will send it to you tomorrow directly via email, so you'll have it downloaded straight into your inbox for anything along the way. If there's any additional resources that Jeff thinks of after the fact as well, I will connect those resources via email in a follow-up email after this webinar. Jeff, I don't see any more at this time. Thank you so much for coming and talking to our youth and our parents. This was absolutely incredible. Way more questions great questions that I'm glad we were able to ask directly and kind of think through. Thank you for our parents for being here live. And we will talk to you guys soon. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.